Today is Tuesday, May 7th, 2013, and this is the start of an interview with Sandra and Bob Fairbanks, Mr. and Mrs. Fairbanks, of Elm Street in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. I'm Nancy Clark, interviewer for the Oral History Project, and this interview will become part of Hopkinton's verbal memories and history for current and future residents. Bob, could you tell us when you came to Hopkinton, about how old you were?
I moved to Hopkinton, my family moved to Hopkinton in 1949. I think it was December.
Mm-hmm.
We moved here, that's why I said 1950.
Yeah. And how old were you?
Let's see, I was in the 7th grade. I think I was 13.
All right. Okay.
13 years old.
All right. And Sandra?
I've lived here all my life. I was actually born in Framingham, but I lived on Ash Street till I married Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather moved here in the early 1900s after he came from Sweden and moved from Chelmsford to Hopkinton and raised my father and his family. So we all grew up in Hopkinton since 1900.
It would be really interesting if you could relate some recollections that you might have from when you were younger, stories that you heard about those earlier generations that were here so early.
Well, the earlier generations, I do know that my father's family, there was like 7 or 8 children, and there was also stepchildren. And the unfortunate thing is, like, my grandfather only lived till he was 50.
Mm-hmm.
He died of bleeding ulcers, which nowadays would have been fine, but and a lot of the children died, and I guess most of it was from tuberculosis. So they lost several members of the family, and also
modern medicine today.
So I mean, he did tell us stories about that, and he told us stories about his father, which I never met. Unfortunately, he had died before I knew him, and my grandmother died in actually 18 months after her last child was born. So I never knew either one of the grandmothers or grandfathers. And my father gave us stories, what kind of people they were, and how hard it was for them when they came here. And I knew my grandfather worked in the quarries in Milford. He was a stone cutter. He was also a blacksmith and had a shop on Ash Street where my family home was. And I guess he did a lot of like blacksmith work and stuff like that and so forth. And so there was some funny stories and stories that probably, like I said, shouldn't relay because there's not much truth to them probably. But it was tough, I think, living here, like 1900s. I think it was pretty tough. They worked very hard. Mm-hmm. So, and I do know my grandfather remarried again only because his youngest child was like 18 months old and he had like 7 children. So he married the next door neighbor lady who was also a widow, and so they brought up the family together. And, my father lived all his life in Hopkinton until he was like 87 years old. Passed away in 1997.
Do you know how your grandfather would have gotten to the quarries in Milford?
I'm not really sure how he got to the quarries in Milford. I think I don't remember what he was doing in Chelmsford. I think it was sort of the same type of work. Mm-hmm. And found out that there were jobs available in Milford, and that's why he came down this way. Yeah. And then bought the house in Hopkinton.
Right. And Hopkinton back then, if I'm correct, there may have been a railroad, a small railroad line that went between Hopkinton and Milford.
There was a mill. My father never really mentioned how he got to work from Milford and back. I'm assuming if he was a blacksmith, he might have rode by horseback. I'm not sure, but he never did mention that.
You can still get around on the old railroad.
Yeah. Well, now it's part of the.
Yes.
It's the bike. It's the walking track and whatever right into Milford. Right. It goes right behind the school.
And how about your parents? Anything they may have told you about their education, the schools in Hopkinton, just sort of getting at how things have changed, about the town,
Yeah.
what it was like, how small.
All I know is he told me he had a lot of friends in town and whatever. My father did not finish school. He went to the freshman year in high school.
And would that have been the Stedgy Prep?
That would have been Stedgy Prep, yes. And the only other school was the center school. He did mention there was a couple of teachers that he remembered, like in his elementary school. And one of them was a Miss Lenahan on Ash Street, was one of his teachers. But he, because he left school just to help earn a living.
And what did your father do?
My father ended up was a heavy equipment operator and mechanic.
And did he do most of his work in Hopkinton?
No,
or?
he worked for Perini's in Framingham, and then he worked for another company in Newton, and worked on heavy equipment all his life. Till he was probably, 65, I think, he retired.
Yeah. And your mother?
My mother's family goes back to Hopkinton too. Her father she originally came from Marlborough, and she was one of 11 children. And her father actually was born in Hopkinton on East Main Street. And my sister and I were tracing back the family history. And we kind of lost a great-grandmother somewhere. We knew she would have been my great-grandfather's mother, but that goes back to like 1800s too in Hopkinton, which is kind of amazing.
It is.
She stayed when she got married. They were married in 1939. They moved. They were renting out the former home on Ash Street, and they had an apartment up on Main Street. I was thinking, I think they told me it was like somewhere across from the Stedgy Prep high school. And then they moved back into the family home, and they raised 4 children on Ash Street. My mother worked for many years at Brown & Smith's, which is now Bill's Pizza. And then from there she went to work for Colola's, and that's where she retired. So my mother ended up being a Hopkintonian. She was here for like 66 years.
Her mother used to worked in the
Meat wrapping? You mean Coles?
No,
Oh.
your mother worked in Columbus, but what did...
She was a meat wrapper.
A meat wrapper.
Yeah, yeah.
The meat department.
Yeah, and then when she worked for Brown Smith, she did up the papers, handed the papers out to all the paper
I
boys.
do remember Brown and Smith in
Yeah.
the 80s.
Yeah,
when I moved
and
here.
she worked there for several years. When she went to work I think I was in high school, and I had a younger sister at home and younger brother, and she worked there for several years.
That just mentioning Brown and Smith gets to the point that even the center of Hopkinton has changed
Oh,
stuff
it's changed so much.
a little bit.
Yeah,
Maybe we
yeah.
can go into more again about your growing up
Yeah.
and what it was like to grow up in Hopkinton, maybe what schools you went to, what you did in your spare
Yeah.
time, who did you hang out with, and
yeah,
what did you do
yeah.
on weekends or
Yeah.
after school.
Yeah. I had a lot of friends, and when I was growing up, when I was younger, it was funny because I liked to play baseball with my friends from Fenton Street. We played in Miss Lenahan's field, actually. She was my father's school teacher, and she allowed us to play baseball in her back cow pasture.
And now would this be in the 1940s?
This would be probably late, I would probably say I was probably 10, 11, so it would probably be the early 50s.
All right.
Like 53 maybe, or so, somewhere around there, 54.
Yeah.
And we played baseball all summer long until, it got dark, and then I'd walk home with my baseball glove. But sometimes we'd walk up to Brown and Smith's to get a Coke or something with all our friends, and there were boys and girls. I grew up with all of them. We went to school all together, from center school on to the high school, because there was no middle school at the time.
So center school, and then what is today the middle school?
The middle school was my high
It's
school.
the junior,
yeah.
senior high school.
I was too young to actually go to Stedgy Prep. I think when I was, Bobby was in Stedgy
I was
Prep.
the
Yes,
last,
we should get you back in here now because at this point you're in Hopkinton.
Yeah.
You're living in Hopkinton.
my class was the last class to graduate from
Stedgy Prep.
Stedgy
the
Prep.
old high school.
and I had a younger sister, and she was the first class to graduate from
The new high school.
the new high school, which is the middle school.
Right. The new high school was built in the mid-50s, is that?
Yes, I
about
think
the
so.
right time?
Actually, yeah, I
You
was
remember
in-
what year you
Yeah,
graduated?
it was finished in 1956.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what, in fact, they only went half a year there,
Yeah, because
because
what
it just wasn't done.
Done, yeah.
But they got it done before the end of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in 7th grade at the center school, and they moved us at the center school in the middle of the year. So I think it was right after Christmas, because of Christmas break.
Right.
And then the next thing, after Christmas break, we all went to the Hopkinton, the high school.
Right.
And we started going to school there. It was wonderful.
Yeah, a new school.
The new
Bob,
school.
what do you remember about the courses that were offered in the old high school?
There were not too many courses to offer. Let's see, you was either college or general.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Oh, and then there was commercial,
Oh,
All right.
and which usually was all girls. How to type,
take shorthand.
take shorthand,
All
and so
right.
forth.
Prepare them for a career after
Yeah.
high
Right.
school. Interesting. Sports? Were there sports teams? Did
Yes,
you play
we only
sports, or
had-
what
we
did
had-
you do for extracurricular?
I played football and I played baseball. And
Was the football team called the Hillers back then?
yes,
Right.
it was the Hillers way back. No, it was the Stone Throwers.
Oh, okay. I knew it was the
Stone-
Stone Throwers at one
Stone
point,
Throwers.
but I had no
Then
idea.
it eventually became the Hillers.
Mm-hmm. But you were a Hiller.
I was a Hiller.
Yeah.
And when you played you didn't play basketball, but I do remember basketball
No,
was
I didn't
was
play
at the-
basketball.
was
but
at
I
the
was
community center here on 1 Ash Street.
number 1 Ash Street.
Number
that
1
used
Ash
to
Street.
be our gymnasium.
All right. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
And
That's
was
what-
that so a basketball sports team affiliated with the high school, or pickup basketball,
No,
or
it was
both?
affiliated
No.
with high school. Yeah.
it was affiliated.
Yeah. The town owned the building because it was also when I had phys ed in the center school in the winter, that's where we would go to have our phys ed. We'd play basketball.
Okay.
It was a great place. It had a big court downstairs, and then it also had a huge balcony that you could go upstairs that you could walk around. It was a great building. I can remember. It was really huge downstairs.
Good facility.
Yeah, it was a nice
Back then.
facility. I mean, there was no bleachers or anything, but they had the folding chairs like they used to have in the town hall, which may be still there. They had the folding chairs all around the outside, but there were no bleachers. But it was, we had, it was great, because that was the only place that we had for a gym. There was no gym at the time at the center school.
All right. Yeah.
And the name, we were in a league that was called, what was it, East Central League?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it was the East Central League.
Yeah.
So sort of Eastern Mass and some Central
Yeah,
Mass
yeah,
Yeah.
towns. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was eight teams in the league. Ashland, Holliston, basically a lot of the teams that are in the Tri-Valley League were in that league.
Which is what we're in today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except you had Westboro, though. You played Westboro.
Oh, yeah, we played Westboro.
Yeah. Did you play Northboro?
Yes, we did.
Because Northboro had Peters High at the time, so,
Right.
yeah.
No, Southboro had Peters
Oh,
High.
Southboro had Peters High. So you played Southboro, too.
Played
So it was
Southboro.
mostly surrounding, the surrounding town.
Right. Which
Yeah.
now are
Right.
some
Yeah.
in the Eastern Mass leagues,
Yeah.
but some are
Right.
in the Central.
Like-
Yeah.
Millis, Medway, Medfield. No, Medfield was. I think we had Medfield in the league, but there was a lot of them that weren't in
Right.
our league at the time. But now they.
Yeah.
They are. Or
Yeah.
Westwood, for
Tri-Valley.
example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Probably seems like Northborough, Westboro were closer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the road networks have changed
Yeah.
and whatnot. Yeah. While we're on education, I just wondered if either one or both of you could comment about maybe what new opportunities. You mentioned how nice the new junior senior
Oh,
high
yeah.
was when it was built.
Yeah.
What did it offer students that they that Stedgy Prep couldn't offer?
Well, I think part of it was there was a gymnasium with showers, and that was really something. And we also had a big auditorium so that when they had the plays, they didn't have to do them at the town hall, because I know that Stedgy Prep did a lot of plays and so forth at the town hall.
Interesting.
And the
Oh,
stage
yes.
up at
Yeah,
the
we
town
did.
hall. And you had all your dances there. So it was a better opportunity for us
It's
that way,
amazing.
as far as,
They go to your senior prom, your junior prom, and all. I must have participated in at least 8, because we didn't have that many students.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd go to the sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and they'd,
Looking for dates.
looking for dates. So
Right.
we
Right.
had a lot of fun.
And the friends fixed up friends probably. They knew who needed
Right.
a date. And,
yeah.
yeah.
And of course, in those
Yeah.
days too, you were on like a prom committee, and you got out of class because you decorated,
Oh, yeah.
like, you had to decorate the town hall and whatever and get that ready, but we decorated the gym. So we got out of class, like, maybe starting 3 weeks before the gym to prepare all this stuff. And it was, I think the kids, I don't know, maybe it's because there's too many kids in each class now, but like I graduated with like 47, maybe 50 people. And so it was much easier than to take 100 people at a prom, if you got that many, and put it together. I just say I think they're missing something to, be able to work. It was fun. I mean, we all worked together. We all knew one another. And my grandson graduated from Hopkinton almost 4 years ago. And it's amazing
Yeah.
because I'll say, well, he graduated with you. I don't know him, Graham. Because I just can't foresee that there was over 200 kids in the graduating
Right.
class.
Yes, now
And
there's
I
almost
said,
300.
Yeah, so I
That
said,
was 300.
Yeah, it's almost 300. So I
So
said,
you really saw some benefits of a small
oh,
community
much,
where
yes. I mean,
you
we
knew
were,
everyone.
We knew everyone. There was everyone. I mean, we were all different, but yet we all got along because I think there was only 47 of us, and so it was wonderful growing up
My
with that
class,
many kids.
when I became a freshman, my class was the largest class that Hopkinton ever had. I think there was 53 of us. And then as time went on, it wore down to 38. That's how many were in my class
when you graduated.
when I graduated.
Now, did some move? Did some drop out because they had to
Some
go to work?
moved, some dropped out,
Some went to like tech
some
schools,
stayed
like-
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe went into the military too.
Yeah.
This would have been just right after World War II. And,
Yeah, right after the
Korean
War.
period,
Yeah,
okay.
Korean period,
Yeah.
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 So, but it was, I mean, that's kind of like, I kind of, because we just had my class just had their 50th class reunion. And
Congratulations.
it was such fun. I mean, it was like never leaving them behind. There were quite a few of us there, and it was just like we picked up where we left off 50 years ago
Right.
Now,
in most cases.
Did you know Marion Harris?
I know of Marion Harris. I didn't know her, but they
She-
give out the award every year. In fact, I was going to ask you, did either of you have
Oh,
Marion
yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, she
And what
was
do you remember about her?
She was just a fabulous person.
I had her as a teacher. I don't know if you had her as a
I had her as
teacher,
a teacher.
also.
I hear she was a teacher, a coach, an
Yeah.
administrator,
Oh,
a
she was.
department
Yeah.
head, a
Yeah.
little bit of
Yeah.
Yeah,
everything.
a little
Mhm.
bit of everything. She was just
You didn't mess around
No,
with her.
no, you didn't, and that's one thing I think is a lot missing in this, I don't know, educational process now, because you respected her, and so, and she was just wonderful. And you showed her respect, and she would help you through anything that, as you could possibly do. My older children had her in school too. And my daughter is a surgical nurse, and she said if it wasn't for Miss Harris, she never would have got where she was, because she brought her through chemistry. And when she went to college, she said, I just flew through the chemistry. because Miss Harris gave me that background.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she was really a fantastic teacher and also, you know, an educator. She was right there with the kids all the time.
She's
She
left
was-
quite a legacy in
Oh,
Hopkinton.
she did. She was a wonderful.
She sure
yeah,
did.
She sure did. She was a wonderful teacher.
As I said, I have heard about her, and I had the privilege of giving out the Marion T. Harris Award
Yeah.
to Hopkinton Senior
That was
at a couple of graduations.
that was a privilege.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
It was.
Yeah, it
yeah.
was. Yeah.
She was really a great
And-
person.
What was I going to say?
I don't know.
Something about Marion or education or.
Oh no, she was real. Aubrey Doyle. She was real close with Aubrey.
Yeah, Aubrey I taught with.
So,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I
You
did.
taught with Aubrey.
Yes.
Oh yes.
Beginning when I first started here, he was still at the high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great.
Yeah.
Well, this is wonderful. Let's maybe move on more to. So you're 6, 7, 8 years apart. Maybe I'm just curious
Yeah.
how you happened to meet.
Yes.
And getting married, and then let's move on into your raising a family here and growing older, maturing and growing older here, and what your recollections are of that.
Actually, he was a blind date, but he really wasn't, because his best friend, which was a classmate in his school, was my sister's boyfriend.
All right. Mm-hmm.
So I've known him since I was 10, because my sister would have her boyfriend over, and this one would come along, you know. So I knew some of his friends in his class, even though I was much younger than him, because they would come, you know, to the house, and then they'd have me call the girls. And I was 10 years old, so
You
I'd
call
call the
the
girls
girls.
on the phone for him and whatever.
That's
But
cute.
so then when I graduated from high school and went on to school, I wasn't at the time dating anyone, and so my sister and her husband had come out from the service. They were living in Hawaii, and they moved back to Hopkinton, and so they decided, why don't you come over? I'm going to ask Bob over. We're going to have a cookout or something. So that's when we got together.
That was it.
Now, yeah. So we started dating then, and we got married in '62. Our first child was born in '63, and our second child was born in '64, and our last one was born in '71. Which,
And we lost one child.
yeah, we lost our
sorry.
middle child at 21 with leukemia.
Oh.
But my kids growing up, they just, I mean, Hopkinton was a wonderful town for them to grow up in. They had the same experiences like we did. I mean, they had
It hadn't
small,
changed
it
too
hadn't
much
changed
yet.
too much. They still had bigger classes, but they were their friends. They stayed friends with all their classmates for all over the years and everything else. They had the same type of, you know.
It wasn't just Hopkinton that were friendly towards each other. I mean, we had friends in all the surrounding towns,
Communities.
and the towns we participated in.
So you would have met them through sports, maybe,
We met
or.
them through sports.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So this is actually a beautiful area.
Still
And
is a
it-
beautiful area. It's just
Oh,
very
it still
busy.
is, sure.
It's just very, very busy compared
Yeah.
to what we
Go
grew up with.
into whatever changes
Yeah.
you've witnessed.
Well, just even changes on my street. It seemed like
And you live on Elm Street,
we live in Elm Street, and we
Near-
live close to 495.
near Caliper.
Yes, and my kids growing up, we don't have a great big yard, and there was a lot of kids in our street. I think we counted like something on 99 kids one time within like 7 houses, and so they played in the street. They played street hockey right in front of our house constantly. Never had to worry about them because there was very few cars going by until they put 495 in, and then it got very busy.
Yeah.
So now it's like we can't even get out of the driveway anymore. But the kids were close with their neighbor friends, and a lot of them were actually classmates from the time they were in kindergarten. So
Who were some of the other families that lived on your street?
some of the families that are still there were the Bagley family was next door. They had 7 children, and Mackenzie's had 9, and Then there were Wilcoxes, they had 2. They were my kids' best friends. Then across the street, Laputris had 6. And I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. And
Did Sandy King Altamura live
Si-
there? I know
she
she does
lived-
now,
she
but
did. She
Yes.
lived down the street. Yeah.
Yeah, she lived
was-
on Elm Street.
Yeah, she lived on Elm Street on the a little
Other
farther
end.
down. So this was like actually before the condos going up.
okay.
And then they took down the Bagley's house next to us, and where Caliper was, were I can't remember. There was like 4 kids in there, and then up further where Putnam Pipe is was the Dorians, and there were so many kids in there, and that was the house that was haunted.
Oh.
Yeah, the kids used to, they were friendly with us, and the house was supposedly haunted up there.
Did somebody live in it?
Yeah, the Dorians lived in it.
Okay.
He was musical for the symphony or something or other. Several.
Would that have been in Boston or in Worcester?
Yes.
No, that was in Boston.
Boston.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in your generation,
Yeah.
there were
Yeah.
maybe more people that were working outside of the
Outside,
area,
yeah,
you think,
outside
than
the
when you
area.
were
Oh,
growing
yeah,
up.
yeah. More people were working outside the area. And then when they put 495 in, they took quite a few houses.
Yeah.
So that we lost some of the kids lost some of their friends in the neighborhood. So.
All right, some of the
But-
play areas
Yeah,
too.
so,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else we can explore and how else 495 changed town, and even before 495, the Mass Pike,
Oh, yeah.
which came in. So one way
Yeah.
would certainly be more traffic.
Yeah.
Right.
More people maybe
More people,
working
yeah,
outside of
working
Hopkinton.
outside
Right.
it was
495 in the Mass Pike.
yeah,
More population in
more
general.
population in general,
That
yeah.
made Hopkinton. That
That-
made Hopkinton
That built
grow.
Hopkinton grow
Yeah.
really
In,
fast.
in your recollection, what would the big decades have been in your adult life when Hopkinton really started growing? When it sort of changed from being, well, my kids knew everybody and
Yeah.
played in the middle of the street.
I'm gonna say
we have all
I think
these
the
huge neighborhoods.
Yeah, I'm gonna say early '80s.
80s and
Yeah,
90s.
I was gonna say early '80s because I think they put 495 in like 1970 something,
Mm-hmm.
75, 77. I'm gonna say it really started changing in the '80s.
And I moved here in the 80s,
Yeah.
and I know it was the beginning of
Yeah, and
some
I
of the
think that's when it
developments.
was, yeah.
and many
Because
more.
when I was growing up in Hopkinton, I don't know about Bobby, but when I was growing up, I couldn't even go uptown without knowing everyone. I mean, or my mother knew everyone, or we were related to somebody.
Everybody knowing
And
you.
also everybody knowing me. So I could not even, as a teenager, I could not move a step without it being reported back to my mother who worked at Brown and Smith's. So and so, because
kept you in line.
yeah, it kept me in line is right. And my mother knew everything I was doing. But it was like, you knew that everybody was looking out for everybody. I mean, it was that kind of a small town that it wasn't, like a mean type of thing. It was like everybody was watching over everybody else's children. I think, growing up in a bigger community, we lose that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know if we have that in some of our neighborhoods anymore, but.
Did you grow up in this area?
I did not. I
Yeah.
moved here in my late 30s, in the mid 1980s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But because at one time, everybody in Hopkinton was related to somebody else in Hopkinton.
Mm-hmm.
And first cousin, second cousin, first cousins once removed, whatever, but everybody was related to one another.
Very small town.
Very
feel.
small town feeling, and like I said, people always watched out for everybody else's children, and it was a good town to grow up in.
Yeah.
And that's why I think sometimes it's changed so much. Now I walk down
Yeah, and I think
and I
that-
don't know anybody anymore.
I know but there is a lot of terrific people.
Oh, there's a lot of new people that
That moved to
wonderful.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So it did give us, I think, more of because like I said, I have never lived anywhere else. So I've met a lot of people that have moved and it just fascinates me that all these people that have sometimes they've moved 5 or 6 times, and I have never lived anywhere else.
It's interesting. Yeah,
And
lucky.
I just, it's amazing to me, I just, what did you do and what was it like? Because I just knew Hopkinton. That's it.
Right. If we can talk maybe a little bit about your career, what you did for work, and before, I'm assuming you were a homemaker, but before you...
Well, I was,
No.
and then I went to, did have a career
Okay,
after
that's
fashion.
good. Bob, we'll do you first.
I was in the auto body business. I worked for my brother for
50 years.
no, not 50, but
Close to
40
50.
some odd years I worked.
And that was Arts on Main Street.
That's Arts on Main Street.
So you probably knew a lot of people that came into that shop too.
Oh, I sure did.
Mhm.
And probably you don't know it, but we were on the other side of town
First.
when we started.
Okay.
Right at the intersection of 495 and
Yeah,
West Main Street. That's where we started.
right before the
Then we-
Gulf Station, right in there.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you moved to East.
Then we moved to East Main Street,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which was a great move.
Yeah.
For my brother.
Yeah, it was a
And
longer
he's-
commute for Bobby. It's a-
3 more miles.
Yeah, it was like a,
My
Yeah.
brother is 80 years old. No, he just turned 81.
Yeah.
He's 81 and he's still working.
Mm.
Every day.
You still
Loves
working
it.
on cars?
Still working on cars.
Excellent. Excellent. I'll keep them young.
yeah, I know.
How about you, Sandra?
When I got married, I stayed at home for the first, I think it was 8 years, 8 or 9 years. And after my last son was born, also my mother-in-law came to live with us. So I went out to get a job. So I actually started off in finance in Framingham, worked in Framingham for like 10 years, and then moved on and worked for Shaman Bank, and then ended up in Marlboro at Marlboro Savings Bank and worked there for like 30, almost 30 years. And I was a loan operations officer, so at the Marlboro Savings Bank. So I did have a career. And then my mother came to live with me in 2009, and that just kind of like, I just couldn't hold down the job and take
Full-time
care of
job,
my mom. It was
right.
full-time
Mm.
job. So I was like 63, and I said, okay, it's time I retire now. So, and I took care of my mom until she passed away. Yeah.
And your children, do they live around here or have they spread their wings and had to move somewhere else?
No, Susan,
The oldest one.
the oldest daughter, she lives in Saxonville.
Mhm. Framingham. Part of
Framingham.
Framingham, yes.
And she has
And
2 children.
she's a nurse,
Yeah.
and she works in the operating room at Framingham,
Yeah.
Framingham Union Hospital.
And
she's
she
still
married
close.
a Saxonville Knight or whatever you call him, his family, for years.
Yeah.
So they settled where
They
you grew
settled,
up?
actually, they settled in their family home, like we settled in our
Oh,
family
geez.
home, they settled in their family home in Saxonville.
And they, what was I gonna say about Jim? Oh, Jim is one of the building inspectors
For the town
in,
of
for the
Framingham.
town of Framingham.
Yeah. So, and my youngest son lives not too far from us, and he and his wife were lucky enough to win one of the lottery
Jennifer?
houses. Is Jennifer
Yeah.
and Rick, and so they live right on Oliver Lane.
Nice.
So they live within walking distance, and they have four boys. So, needless to say, we see those 4 boys constantly.
Well, that's nice. I think
Yeah.
sometimes people that grow up in a small town recognize the value of it,
Yeah.
even though there are changes,
Yeah.
and
Well,
choose to settle there
Yeah,
if they can.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. And so we see those grandchildren, because actually Bob
You-
is the bus driver for
I'm
them.
sure you
Yeah.
knew Cameron, did you know Cameron?
I knew of them, yes, in
Yeah.
school,
Yeah.
when I was teaching.
That's the trouble now, the school
It
has
gets
grown
larger.
Yeah,
so there's probably a lot of children that you don't
go
know.
through that, yeah.
I knew
You know
everyone.
of
When
them.
I first started, I knew everyone, and then
Yeah.
it got
Yeah.
so, like
Yeah,
you said,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
bigger, yeah.
So it gets bigger.
I'm trying to think, any other recollections from when you were growing up of sort of recreation, leisure, Hopkinton State Park, Ashland, like Whitehall? Did you do anything like
Ashland,
those?
I'm trying to think, because when I was growing up in Hopkinton, there was nothing. We had Sandy Island. We biked to
Sandy
Sandy,
Beach, all right.
Sandy Beach.
At Lake Maspinock.
Hopkins State Park was not open when I was younger.
All right.
And I don't even think Ashland State Park was. You could probably get into the reservoir. I know you could get into the reservoir. My father would take my younger brother, and because my younger brother almost drowned there. But it wasn't a beach at the time. And so if you went swimming, there was a huge drop off, and that's what happened. And my father couldn't swim, and my brother couldn't. Luckily, they got him out, and that was it for there. We could go to Sandy Island after that. But we biked to Sandy Island a lot. Growing up, I had cousins that lived in Maple Street. They were Johnsons also. And there was like 8 of them. And we would bike to Mendon to see their grandparents. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was like probably 10. And my cousin was about a year younger than I am. And he really didn't know how to get on the bike. Somebody had to put him on the bicycle. And then somebody also had to stop him. But we drove from Hopkinton to Mendon. And we would do this quite a bit in the summer.
And how old would the oldest kid
The oldest one probably would be my cousin Hazel, who would have been probably now, if she was living, 76, maybe 77, Hazel.
Hazel's.
So she was probably, at the time, she was probably only about 14 or 15.
Young teenagers biking all the way to Mendon.
Yeah, with the
Not
two
much
younger
traffic.
cousins, no, hardly any traffic. And we'd
Find your way to Route 16.
Yep.
Probably.
We go all over the back way, and when we bike back home, and we did that a lot of times when we go swimming too. There were a bunch of us. We'd bike.
And as long as
we had no, I think there was bus service to Framingham, so it would be a treat to go to like the movie theaters in downtown Framingham, and that was a treat to go shopping. That's where we did our Christmas shopping. There was no Shoppers World. There was no.
It was downtown.
It was downtown Framingham, and we'd go shopping at Christmas. At the time, I too remember that my mother would put me on the bus for like a dentist appointment in Ashland, and but
by yourself.
Yeah, by myself. Yeah, and then I'd have enough money to get back, but there was not much recreation. We made our own. Like I said, we played sports because the Little League had Carrigan Park, and that was the only Little League park. So we would.
And would that have only been boys?
No.
Or were there girls too?
Oh, there were girls.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Mm-hmm.
But when we, the Little League in my age, it was only all just boys. Just the boys could play Little League. I actually, when it came time to the late 70s, my daughter was one of the first girls to play on, and it was a baseball team. It wasn't softball. And it was funny because my son, who was like 11 months younger than her, started off Little League with Bobby, who was a coach for like 30 years, when he was like 6. So he'd played Little League since he was 6. When Susan started playing, she probably was, maybe 10? And he played all through those years. Her team won the championship, and he never even got a trophy. And to this day, she still has the trophy.
You go, girl.
So because it was he couldn't understand it because there were girls on the team. So I think there were 2 girls on the team that and everybody. I guess wasn't that many girls that tried out, but each team might have had 1 girl, if not 2 girls.
Yeah,
but
it's fascinating how
how
that developed over the years.
Yeah, how it developed over the years, and now we look at the Little League and.
All the girls softball teams.
Oh yeah. Well, there's like 1,200 kids in the Little League. When Bobby used to coach, from the time. No, actually, when Bobby was in high school, he coached the Pony League team, and that was another.
So that would have been
that was
50s.
One of our famous dates. Yes, because when we were dating, we'd only see each other on the weekends because I had school. So but in the middle of the week, he'd have a game, and he would need drivers because
I needed transportation.
He needed transportation for his team. So he'd call me up and he said, "Do you think you could probably take your car and come to the game?" So I would be one of the chauffeurs. He'd have his car, and we'd pick up the team, and we'd wait for him at the Common or the library, and we'd take them to the towns, wherever it was, and then I did the scores.
How old were these Pony League kids?
They were
12 to 15.
12 to 15.
Or 13 to 15.
So they wouldn't have had a driver's license.
No.
Even if they did, they might not have had access to a car.
No, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Back then,
Or they
yeah.
wouldn't have had.
And some of them, it was funny because at the time when I was dating Bobby, I was only 17. So some of these kids were like 2 years younger than I
Younger than
was.
you.
Yeah, and I knew a lot of them, or even a year younger than I was.
Yeah.
So, but it was fun.
Now-
Yeah.
Some of our classmates had automobiles.
Mm-hmm.
Old clunkers, but they had automobiles.
Yeah.
Not too many.
Yeah.
Now you go to the high school parking lot and
Oh,
it's
no,
amazing
no,
what you
no,
see.
I know.
They got better cars.
Mercedes.
Yeah, no, they were better cars than we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But growing up in, I don't know about you, but I know there wasn't that much in town to do.
Mhm.
You know,
So
there
you just
wasn't-
made your own.
We made our
entertainment,
own
sort of.
teams, and we made our own, games that we did. And like I said, we bicycled to the
Yeah.
park, and I can remember the marathon. We used to go to the marathon every year, and we take our bikes, my cousins and I, and we take our bikes, and there would probably be 25 runners, maybe.
Oh, no.
There wasn't that many runners, and when
There'd be
we'd follow them all the way down. We rode behind them
There wasn't
Towards
200.
Ashland.
towards Ashley, and we'd go back
Mhm.
up towards, and I guess it was not Chestnut Street. I'm trying to think which street. We'd come out Chestnut Street, Clinton Street.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, we'd go up Clinton Street.
So you think maybe not even a couple hundred runners?
Oh,
back
yeah,
then.
there wasn't even, yeah. And
I'd say around a couple hundred.
Really?
runners.
Yeah. Oh, that's another
can
thing
only-
that's really changed, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then that lady, what's her name? She was actually the first first female runner. What's her
I
name?
can't remember.
I don't know.
She's
About
on-
what year would that have been? Do you know?
Yeah,
Yeah, I can't even, in the 70s.
yeah.
Well, the first year that she raced, it increased to about 700 runners.
Yeah.
I said, holy mackerel, 700 runners.
Mm.
Now look at,
I'm talking this, if I was probably only about 8 or 10, so I'm talking about 1950.
Oh, I know.
And when we went, and I mean, that was something to do because it was a marathon.
Yeah.
But there was never crowds. There was never a big thing in the town. There was never, radio, television and everything else. It just,
Right.
the runners would gather and that
Yeah.
was be it. And we'd follow them on our bikes until Clinton Street and then we'd come around the back way and come home.
So it was always a big event in Hopkinton,
It was a
but
big
more
event, but
a big small
very-
town event,
yeah,
not a
yeah.
media.
No, not a media
Media
event like it
event.
is now. Because
Yeah.
I think the first time I decided,
and look at what happened.
I decided to go.
Sad.
I was
Sad.
totally amazed at the amount of people in town.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because
Interesting.
for the years I worked, and I worked on, so I never did really see it.
Yeah.
And I think when I did get a day off, my daughter-in-law Jennifer convinced me to walk up with them. I was amazed. I could just, to
How
see
it had
what it had
changed and
grown.
grown.
Yeah.
Mm,
It was
yeah.
just amazing, like I
Yeah.
said, because I always say, oh my gosh, we used to follow them on our bicycles.
Now they start off in
Oh yeah, this,
groups, right?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Different waves. Yeah.
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 How about one thing we haven't talked about at all is town government. I don't know if when you were younger, if your parents went to town meeting, or if you've seen any changes in people volunteering for that, or
I'll tell you a story about one town meeting, and it was the town meeting, I guess, that they were voting on building the new high school, which is now the middle school. And I do know
so this would be in the 50s.
This would be 50s.
Yeah.
My father and my uncle was a carpenter in town for years, worked for Walter Varnum for like 40 years. And so my father and my uncle went to the town meeting. They were both against the building, not per se of building the new high school, but building the high school the way it was built. They both agreed, or they both, stood up against it. I do know that because it had the flat roof, and they both said, not in New England, it's not a good thing to put a flat roof in New England and whatever. And so I guess a lot of people voted them down, and from what I gather, my father said that was the last town meeting he went to because they didn't like his opinion. And you know, I'm not saying anything, but I will say going to that school, within 2 years after we were there, we had the roof leaked constantly. The roof leaked.
It's been a perennial problem.
Yes.
My first
Yes.
8 years in the school system,
Yeah.
we were in
So
that building and it was leaking.
That was about the only thing on town government that
that you remember.
that I remember. I do remember. I do remember, like, the police department. We knew the policemen, and because, you know, and there was like maybe three policemen on the job, and the rest of them were all, you know, volunteers. We remember the fire department with Joe Pine as our fire chief, who was a great fire chief. But it was funny because I do remember when the fire alarms went off, you'd see all these men coming out of their houses into the cars, and because it was all volunteer. So, I mean, and they did a fantastic job. They did in those days, like they still do now.
I think that when your husband was in politics, that was my favorite group of selectmen that we ever had. And it was Mary Pratt,
Yeah.
Ron,
Eric Sonnet.
Eric,
So,
Lenny Holden. Yeah.
and there was one more.
For a while, Muriel Kramer.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember who was Paul Nelson. I think
Oh.
was before
yeah.
Muriel.
But they were interested.
But
I'll tell them.
Yeah, I know. I stayed out of politics. That was one thing growing up. I loved my father dearly. He was a wonderful man, very prejudiced, but a wonderful man, very kind.
Well, the generation.
Yeah, it was the
Times have
generation,
changed.
the times, and everything else is the generation. So one thing that I always remembered growing up with him is never argue politics and never argue religion, and I kept that way. And I said, kept myself, you know, out of trouble and kept that way.
Yeah.
But you know, so I do remember that. I remember some heated arguments in the family and in the house and with, you know, just friendly arguments, but, you know, against politics and
Yeah.
religion. And
Good
so
policy.
it's a good policy, I
Yeah.
said, I've learned, but,
Right. Well, and when the town was small, it's still a
Yeah.
small town, although much bigger than before. It's very democratic when
Yeah.
you have town meeting and you have all
Yeah.
these volunteers on
Yeah.
the boards.
Right.
And
Yeah.
what you said, Bob, about mentioning the board of selectmen that my husband Ron was on in the early 2000s.
yeah.
That was the first 5-member board
Yeah.
of selectmen.
That was
So
right.
Yeah.
as we had grown,
Yeah.
we needed to sort
Just,
of,
yeah,
or
yeah,
felt
yeah,
that we
yeah.
needed to increase
Yeah.
the representation
Uh-huh.
a little bit more. But yeah. Well, is there anything else that you can recollect that you'd like to say before we close? You've been a wealth of information. Thank you so much.
No, I don't know about the wealth of information, but I mean, like I said,
very interesting.
it was a wonderful town to grow up in. It really was. It still is a wonderful town. It's just bigger
It's bigger.
and better ideas. I think, you know, are brought in from newer people, and sometimes it's hard to change. It's hard
I
to
love
accept the
the
change,
idea.
but
Yeah.
Of all the sports teams that we have now.
yeah.
That's certainly
Like
expanded.
tennis.
Yeah.
Tennis.
And you're because you're the tennis coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it
And
gives the
lacrosse
kids more
and
opportunities.
hockey.
We didn't have that many. Like I said, growing up, when I was younger, I wasn't sports minded in school, and so growing up, I really didn't have, you know, a lot of stuff to fall back onto to get involved in. So now I think it's great. There's a lot of stuff for the kids to get involved in.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
When I was growing up, I think the girls had one more team than the boys.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
They had softball, basketball, field hockey, and what else? They had one more sport. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but there was
The boys
not-
had basketball, baseball, football,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. There may
When
have
I
been
was growing
tennis.
up,
There
I
may
think
have been
that
girls tennis back then.
Yeah, they didn't have girls tennis
Yeah.
back then. They didn't.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, they had softball and basketball.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember if they had a field hockey team. If
And Marion Harris was a coach of most of
she was a coach of
That's
most
what
of
I've
them.
heard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I suppose that's one thing when you talk about the number of sports teams growing as the town gets larger.
Yeah.
with a larger
Well,
student population, you
yeah.
certainly do get that, and then the courses, the amount of courses
The
that they
amount of
have
courses
now,
that they offer now.
the different,
It's amazing. It's, like even when he graduated versus when I started school, it was the same thing. There were 3 general, which was where they stuck people that just didn't have any idea what they're gonna do, business or commercial, and college.
Yeah.
And if you didn't make, like what I did, I was planning going to college, but I couldn't get the algebra or whatever, it just wouldn't, math was not easy for me. So therefore, I just said, I can't do this, so I switched to business, which in turn gave me a good background
career.
for my business world, but it's amazing. It's just, I look at what my grandchildren are learning, and it's just, my gosh, they know more than I did in center school or in elementary school than I learned when I was in high school. It's just.
What
it's
do you
amazing.
teach in?
I taught high school history and government.
History, yeah.
This is my first year retired.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
You
it's
enjoying
great
it?
school. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
I
All right,
loved
well-
history.
Good.
And I loved geography.
Good. Well, and I appreciate. I mean, this is history. This is going to be part. This interview is going to be part of the oral record of the town. So you're showing your love of history by agreeing to do the interview. Thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome.
And I just want to close by saying this is the end of the May 7th interview with Sandra and Robert Fairbanks. The interviewer was Nancy Clark.
That's great.
Thank you.